What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Preview, and I'm here to take you through the most comprehensive NBA player prop preview you are likely to see. If this is your first time watching these videos, I do this every single night. I share my screen, we go through Outlier, I tell you what I like, I tell you what I don't, and I do all this to hopefully give you all the information that you need to make the best bets possible. It seems to be working. I get comments every single day from you guys saying that based on the research and analysis and insights I've given you, you guys are hitting winners. Now, I've got to say congratulations because me personally, I've been getting rinsed 2 days in a row, 2 losing days. I've had some absolute shockers. What is that? What we'd call them here in Australia. And reflecting back, what's clear to me now is the same strategy and research I used throughout the regular season to find my picks, not necessarily going to work here in the playoffs. So, going to switch things up. I haven't pre-looked at the board at all, so all of these lines, it's the first time that I'm seeing them. I'll show you what I see, unbiased, no pre-calculated decisions. I'll be reacting on the spot, and then by the end of it, hopefully I can come up with some great plays. Now, if that sounds interesting, let's go. So we're kicking it off with the Boston Celtics versus the beat-up Miami Heat. Now, Miami, Duncan Robinson's a game-time decision. Jimmy Butler, Terry Rozier still out for this one. Boston, number one team throughout the regular season. Heavy favorites in the opening game here against Miami. The line, currently it's moved to 14.5. I think it opened at 13.5. And big money still coming in for Boston. So there could be a potential blowout on the cards. But you're not here for my thoughts in the game. Let's talk about player props and figure out what we like on the board. I think we'll kick things off with the Miami Heat players first. Checking to see who we got. Let's start with Tyler Hero. Now, Tyler Hero was pretty awesome in the first game. He didn't cover his points line, though, but filled up the stat sheet with rebounds and assists. But let's talk about it. Now, Tyler Hero, he's covered his points line here of 23.5 in 3 out of his last 10 games. Not overly impressive. And in head-to-head matchups against Boston, he's covered in 4 out of his last 7. He's versed the Celtics 3 times this year. 28, 19, and 24 points. We do have to sprinkle some Jimmy Butler juice on this because Jimmy's not out and he impacts everybody. So these are Tyler Hero's last 10 games without Jimmy Butler. You can see he's covered this points line only 3 out of those 10 games. So not overly impressive. But if we look at the head-to-head matchups, he's played the Celtics 4 times without Jimmy, and he's covered this line 3 out of the 4 games, 1 out of 2 games this season. The game he went under, only scored 19 points, and he only played 29 minutes in a blowout loss, 14 attempts in that game. In that last game, it's Philly. What did he do? 27 shot attempts. He was 9 for 27, so definitely aggressive, which is nice. So I'd lean to the over in his points prop purely on this volume alone. If he's going to take 27 shots without Jimmy, you've got my interest. It's a pretty important game here. We know that the Boston Celtics don't necessarily defend perimeter players very well, especially guards. I feel like they'll let Tyler Hero work one-on-one out on the perimeter up against Drew Holiday, and Tyler Hero being aggressive as he is. If he can take over 20 shots, I don't mind this play. So what I'm going to do, I'll be copy and pasting these onto my spreadsheet, have them as little leans. I'll be researching them a little bit more deeper later. Now let's look at his assist prop. Now, his line's at 5.5. He's cashed in 6 out of his last 10 games. He's hit in 3 consecutive games. Quite well against the Chicago Bulls, 9 assists in that game. So cashing it nicely. In head-to-head matchups, he's cashed in 4 out of his last 7 without the Boston Celtics. He's cashed in 2 out of the 3 games this season, 6, 6, and 4. If we take a look, does he go without Jimbo? And against the Celtics, he's cashed this assist line in both games without Jimmy this year. And in his last 10 games, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games without Butler. Moving into his rebound prop, 5.5 is the line that we're looking at. 5 of his last 10, 3 of his last 7 against Boston, 1 of his last 3 this season. We have the Jimmy filters on. He's cashed this in 2 of his last 4 against Boston. And in his last 10 games, he's cashed in 4 out of his last 10. So I think the points plus assists could be on here. 29.5 points plus assists is what we're looking at. That could be a good play because I think he's going to have a very high usage rate. Obviously, the concern is the blowout, right? So if the line's going to be at 15.5, potentially by the time tip-off happens, if the Miami Heat lose by 20 points, is Tyler Hero going to get some minutes? So that's one thing that's on my mind at the moment, and I'll be thinking that for a lot of these players. Pumping the brakes real quick. I just wanted to add this clip in This is a very long video. I spent a lot of time previewing these games, talking about players, filtering minutes, player out. So use the chapters below and jump to the game that you're looking for if you need to. Who's the next guy I want to talk through? Jaime Jaquez. Now, Jaime had an excellent game in that elimination against the Chicago Bulls. 21 points. He's now scored. He's covered this line in 4 consecutive games now, which is pretty awesome. Up against the Boston, though, Boston Celtics gets a little bit more difficult. So he's played the Celtics twice this year, 0 and 6 points. In those games, 14 and 28.6 minutes. He's only averaging 4 attempts per game. We're going to have to look at his games without Jimmy Butler. Let's take a look. So games without Jimmy, he's cashed in 5 of his last 10, averaging 14.7 points per game. Versus the Celtics once without Jimmy Butler in the lineup, and that's the game where he played 28 minutes and he only scored 6 points. But what we are seeing in his more recent games against Chicago, shot the ball 16 times, highly aggressive, and he played 34 minutes. So if they can get that type of aggression for Jaime Jaquez, he could be on here. But yeah, look, I liked what I saw from him in that last game, but at the time, the matchup against the Bulls was a lot easier than what he's going to see here against Boston. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, even potentially Derek White. They do have some pretty good defenders out there for the Boston Celtics. Yeah, I'm not too sure on Jaime Jaquez. I'm not feeling it in my loins, but you might be. Looking at his assist prop, though, that's 3.5. He had 6 assists against the Bulls in their last game. 3 of his last 10. Got under in his last 2 against Boston. Games without Jimmy, what do we see? He's cashed this in 4 out of his last 10. Without Jimmy, 6 assists against Chicago. Nothing happening against Boston. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure. If the Celtics allow the 5th fewest assists, so that 3.5 might be difficult for him. But in a lot of minutes, he might be able to get it done. Rebound-wise, he's lands at 4.5, 2 out of his last 10. Obviously, he hasn't got it done against Boston because he barely played any minutes in those games. Without Jimmy, Jaime Jaquez, 6 out of his last 10, averaging 5.2 rebounds per game. So, could get it done, averaging 30 minutes a night without Jimmy. But there's been a few games. If we go 30 minutes a night without Jimmy, what do we see? This season, 10 out of 18 games, Jaime Jaquez has covered this line. Yeah, so it's not too bad. I'm just not sure if I love it. Where's that asshole? Here he is. Bam Adebayo. So let us down deeply in that last game against the Bulls. I predicted him to have a strong one because he usually does without Jimmy, but he was ass. Now, Bam. He's covered this line in 3 out of his last 10 games. He's covered it in 3 consecutive games against Boston this year. Last year against Boston in the playoffs, he wasn't that great. Had 2 strong games. 2022, he did nothing, well, didn't do nothing, but went under this points line in 5 consecutive games. Then coming into this season, aggressive against the Boston Celtics, 23, 14, and 18 shot attempts. If we have a look at his games without Jimmy Butler against Boston, what do we see? We can see that he's covered this in 3 consecutive games without Boston. One of those were this season where he scored 22 points on 18 shot attempts. In his last 10 games without Jimmy, you can see that the numbers are excellent. He was just trash against the Bulls. So I don't know what that was all about. Only took 8 shots. Now, I really want to fade Bam because I'm petty like that. But even if I fade him, it has no impact on Bam whatsoever. So I'd just be an emotional idiot. So I'm not going to be doing it. Honestly, the data tells me to take the over. It really is. It's telling me to take the over. I'm going to add it to my short list anyway. I'm going to deep dive this thoroughly and we'll see where I end up. But I don't emotionally, I want to take the under because he pissed me off. But all this data to take the over without Jimmy up against Boston, both like Bam's got it all. I think that game against the Bulls was potentially an outlier, right? The Miami Heat were rolling. They beat them by 20 points. They didn't have to do nothing. This is a game where they're not going to be winning. So he's going to have to be aggressive in this one. I don't think he can get away with being so unselfish. Assist-wise, his line is at 4.5. 2 out of his last 10. And 6 out of 14 games against the Celtics. He went under in all 3 games against them this season. Without Jimbo, in 3 games against Boston, 1 out of the 3. And in his last 10, 6 out of the last 10. So, yeah, I'm not loving the assist prop here for Bam, but you might think otherwise. Rebound-wise, lines at 10.5. 4 of his last 10, and only 4 of his last 14 games against the Boston Celtics. If we take Jimmy out of the equation here, Bam's covered this line in 2 out of 3 games against Boston. One of those games this season where he had 13 rebounds against them. And in his last 10 games, he's cashed this in 6 of them. He only had 4 boards against the Bulls. Again, could be a massive outlier that game. This is another prop of Bam's where I'd lean to the over. But he does have a difficult matchup here against Porzingis. If Porzingis is going to be out on the perimeter the whole time, I don't know how well Bam's going to be getting these rebounds, especially if they switch in the pick and roll. Bam, more than capable of defending a Tatum or a Brown on the perimeter for a few sets, but it's also going to take him out of position. So given he's able to switch, most likely he will. He won't be playing too much drop coverage in this game, I'm sure of that. So yeah, Bam, I'm going to look at points prop. Not get too emotional about it. Let's take the emotion out of betting, and then we'll see where I land. Who else do we have? Haywood Highsmith, I bet on him. He actually covered his points line, surprisingly. He covered his points line, but I took him for 3-pointers and he had 1. So his line in the last game against the Bulls was 6.5. This game, 6.5 as well. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, and against Boston, he has had some games against them before. Some pretty strong games, but highly inconsistent. And 2 out of the 3 games where he had an amazing one was when Jimmy Butler was out of the lineup. So he got more minutes, some opportunities. His last game didn't do too well. And these are his last 10 games without Jimmy Butler in the lineup, averaging 8.7 points per game. So Haywood Highsmith, I don't know if I can take him again. That was very stressful. So I shan't be touching Haywood Highsmith in this. I just don't know where these Miami Heat guys are going to get their points from. We've got Tyler Hero, Harkes. They're probably the main 3. But I think those 3 combined won't only get 50 points. So you're going to need at least 100 to beat this Boston Celtics team. So, yeah, I'm not loving anything that I'm seeing so far. Let's jump into these Celtics and see if we can find some value. We'll start with Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum's points prop is at 26.5. He's gone under in 6 consecutive games now. Hasn't played a game since April 12th, so about 9 days. But for Jason Tatum, what do we see? Somewhat difficult matchup here against Miami, but Tatum's done okay in the past. 7 of his last 14 games he's covered against Miami. His last 4 games, including 3 games this season, he went under this line against the Miami Heat. Played them in the playoffs last year. Obviously, 7 games. Miami got the win. The first 3 games of those series, the first 2 games of that series, sorry, he had 34 points. Both of these were home games. Then he went on the road for 2 games, cashed 1 from 2, then went under at home, and then on the road again. He cashed, and then in the closing game where they lost by 20 at home, he only scored 14 points. So no Jimmy Butler in this one, though, so that does make things a little bit easier for Jason Tatum. But look, I haven't bet on this man much this season, and I'm not going to start now because this is just too wild for me. But maybe his assist prop. 5.5's a line. 4 of his last 10 games in head-to-head matchups. 5 of his last 14. So look, a lot of these numbers for Tatum are going to be inconsistent. You'd have to be a very casual bettor to take any of these with confidence, I'd say. Or you'd have to know a shit ton more than I do. So, yeah, Tatum's assist prop, that seems a little bit too high for me. If we look at his rebound prop, 8.5 plus 100. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10. Against Miami, though, has had some pretty strong rebounding games. 9 of his last 14, averaging 10 rebounds a game against the Miami Heat. He did cash this in 1 of 3 games this season. And in the playoffs last year, he cashed in 5 out of the 7 games against Miami. He covered this rebound line. So this could be a play that I get around. 8.5. It's not the worst play in the world. Just checking to see what happened in the games he didn't cash. Assuming they might have been blowouts, but they weren't. He's actually cashed this rebound line in blowout wins and losses. So even though there is a huge spread in this game, there's still good potential here for Tatum. In these games where there were blowouts this year, he still managed to get 8 rebounds. So I'd expect Tatum to play about 40 minutes in this one. Gets 40 minutes. I think this rebound prop's not too bad. I don't like betting on Jason Tatum, but the rebound prop, I might be able to get around. I don't hate it. He's been very close to it up against Miami. These last 10 games of the season, we know that Boston were in a funk. They weren't giving a shit, but I think in this game they will. Let's have a look at his assist prop. Oh, we've looked at the assist prop, actually. Points done. Points I don't like. Assists I don't like. Rebounds I might be able to get around. All right, let's take a look at Jaylen Brown now. His line is at 21.5. He has cashed in 5 of his last 10 games. And against the Miami Heat, he's cashed in 6 of his last 13. But he's gone over in 2 of his last 9 games. My lord. So Jaylen Brown has had his struggles. A lot of those games do include the playoffs. So let's just have a quick look at what he did in the playoffs. Covered in game 1. He then went under for 4 consecutive games. Covered in game 6. And then he went under in game 7. So had his difficulties with Miami in the past. I wouldn't put it past him, though. I wouldn't take the under, but don't have enough confidence to even look into that for the over. Looking at his assist prop, 5 of his last 10, 9 of his last 13 against Miami, though he's been able to cash this assist prop. If you look at what happened in the playoffs, 5, 3, 2, 4, 2, 3, 5. So cashing in 5 out of the 7 games in the playoffs against Miami, 1 out of the 3 games against them this season. This is at minus 148, though, so that's not great. If you have a look at his rebound prop, 5.5 is the line. He's cashed in 5 of his last 10. And then against Miami, 8 of his last 13. So 2 out of the 3 games this season, he went over his rebound line. The only game he went under was a 33-point win to the Boston Celtics. In that game, he only played 27 minutes. So in the other games where he got over 33 minutes, it looks like he's been hitting them quite well. In the playoffs, a couple lousy efforts. Let's not lie about that. But in more recent times, when the minutes are there, Jaylen Brown been cashing this rebound line here against Miami. So, yeah, I don't hate Jaylen Brown's rebounds either. The odds aren't great, minus 135, but we'll see. We'll have a look into that. All right, cool. Points, rebounds, assists, all done for Jaylen Brown. Who else have we got? Drew Holiday. Let's check out Drew Holiday. Now, his points line 11.5, 5 of his last 10 games. He's played the Miami Heat 3 times. This was his season, 17, 17, and 5. So he did score quite well in those games. How many of these were blowouts? One of them was a blowout, 33-point win. And in that game, he only played 28 minutes. But Drew Holiday scored 17 points himself. So he shoots 65% in these games. So the volume's not very high, but the shot percentage is very good. 64% from 3. It's very high. Looking at his last 10, 45% from the field, 35% from 3. And on the season, 48% from the field, 43% from 3. So, yeah, definitely what we're seeing up against Miami is an outlier. I wouldn't expect for that. But what might be interesting is his 3-point prop, 1.5. Hitting 59% of games this year. And he hit in 2 or 3 games against Miami. Yeah. I don't like the 3-point prop that much. Looking at his assists, he's covered in 5 of his last 10, averaging 4.6. In those games against Miami, he cashed in all 3, 7, 5, and 6. He's got a good matchup here for assists as well. So this, I'll take. It's ticking 3 boxes for me. So I don't mind the assist prop here for Drew Holiday. This last 10 games, willing to forgive the Boston Celtics. They were fucking all over the place. And let's look at his rebound line. 4.5, 6 out of his last 10 games. And in head-to-head matchups, 2 out of 3 games against the Miami Heat, he covered this rebound line. So, yeah, I don't love the rebound line. He has hit it quite well this season, though. But this is at minus 140. He's hit this at a 65% rate this year. So, yeah, I don't think it's a terrible play there for Drew Holiday. Who else we got? Kristaps Porzingis. Now, where Kristaps at? 18.5, 6 out of his last 10 games. Tough matchup here against Bam. But in the 3 games he played against Miami this season, 17, 19, and 25. So despite the tough matchup, Porzingis has still gotten busy. The game he went under wasn't a blowout. Played 30 minutes, shot 6 for 12. So if we're looking at his field goals attempts, they're not very high here against the Miami Heat. Attempting 4.73 pointers, but he is getting to the line quite well. So that's not too bad for Porzingis. But I feel like that line is just about right. I think if Boston are going to blow him out, Kristaps would have a lot to do with it. I probably wouldn't mind looking at his first quarter points prop because Kristaps, they do feed him early. In the first quarter this season, he's averaging 7 points per game. The line here is at 5.5. He's cashed this in 7 out of his last 10. And in the 2 Miami games, 14 in the first quarter of one game, 11 in the following game. His very first game against Miami, he only scored 2 points in that and only played 7 minutes. So if we can get about 10 minutes, in his last 10 games, what was he playing? 9.2 minutes per game. I guess this is the challenge because in head-to-head matchups, we can see in these 2 games, 11 and 12 minutes, pretty much playing the full first quarter. If you can play the full first quarter here, Porzingis, I reckon he can cover this with ease because I know they feed him early. They want to get the big man rolling. Might even consider looking at a high-value single there for him to get 10 points in the first quarter. But we'll see where we end up here. Let's have a quick look at his rebound line: 7.5, 5 out of his last 10, 4 consecutive games where he's covered this rebound line. And against Miami, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3 games. So the 2 games where he covered his rebound line of 7.5, they were tightly contested. The game where he went under was a blowout, and he only played 20 minutes. Now, there's still a chance that there could be a blowout today in this game. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be cautious about in this game. Who else do we have? Derek White, 12.5 points. He's 7 out of his last 10. He's cashed this in 8 of 14 games against Miami. 2 out of the 3 games against Miami this year he's cashed in. And if we go back to the playoffs last year, he cashed in 3 out of the 7 games. So a little bit inconsistent here for Derek White, but you'd have to be brave to take his points prop. But I'd usually take it if there was an injury. At least we know he's going to get some sort of increase. He's definitely going to be the 4th option at least for this Boston Celtics team. So not loving the points prop there. Looking at his assist line, though, it's 4.5. Minus 148, though. It's not great. 7 out of his last 10. And he's only covered in 4 out of his last 14 games against Miami. 1 out of the 3 this year. Rebound-wise, 4.5. 4 of his last 10. And he's only cashed in 3 of 14 games against Miami. So, yeah, interesting to see his rebounds and assist lines quite high based off of his hit rates against Miami. But then even on the season, he's only got a 40% hit rate for his rebounds. So I might look at his rebounds plus assists. Line's at 9.5. So this season, he's hit this line at a 41% hit rate, which is not great. And in head-to-head matchups, he's only covered this line twice against Miami. One of those were this season. But if there's a potential blowout risk as well, we might be able to get some help on the rebounds and assists here for Derek White. I think the last thing I'd like to check is what's his record covering this line when Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Jason Tatum are in the lineup. What do we see? All right. So this season, he's hit this line 10 of 37 games with all of those guys in the lineup. But God, he's gotten to 9 a lot of times. 10 of 13 games, though, 27%. And if we look at head-to-head games with all of those, well, that really includes just this season. He's 1 of 3 because we've got Porzingis and Drew Holiday in there. But let's say if we move Drew Holiday and Porzingis, so just Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So against Miami, he's cashed this in 2 of 13 games with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in the lineup. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind looking at an under here for Derek White, but I'm also thinking about how terrible my plays have been the last few days. Maybe I'll take the over because I fade myself. I don't know. I'm all over the place. The other person I want to look at here is Peyton Pritchard, though. So Boston are most likely going to run an 8-man. They're going to run 8 men until garbage time. That'll be the starting 5: Peyton Pritchard, Al Horford, and Sam Hauser. Now, Peyton Pritchard, he gets on there, he jacks threes. His recent form looks excellent, but there are a lot of blowouts in this game or a lot of rest for the starters. So I'm not overly excited by his recent form. I get what's happening here. In head-to-head matchups against Miami, though, he's cashed this in 2 out of the 3 games this season. Last year in the playoffs, he only cashed this once. But in those games, he barely played 10 minutes. But at the same time, he's moved up in the rotation this year. On the season, let's check his minutes real quick. On the season, he was getting 22 minutes a night, 7.7 attempts per game, but a lot of that's elevated by what he did in these last few games. So I'm going to filter to games where he plays less than 30 minutes because I don't see him getting 30 minutes at all. In games where he's played less than 30 minutes, he's cashed in 39 of 69 games, a 57% hit rate. If we want to get crazy with it, in games where the Boston Celtics win by more than 10, let's just go with 10. What happens here? So Peyton Pritchard has now cashed this in 23 of 34 games where the Celtics win by more than 10. So if the Celtics are blowing some teams out, Peyton Pritchard gets more minutes and more opportunities. Now, the 5.5 is not a bad line because that's only 2 3-pointers for Peyton Pritchard. His 3-point line is at 1.5 in this game. On the season, he hit this 50% of the time. So that's not too bad. But Peyton Pritchard points, 5.5. I feel like it's a bit of a steal because he's been hitting that well recently. His minutes are probably a lot higher. I'll probably put him down for 20 to 25 minutes in this game tonight. If he's getting 20 to 25 minutes, like a lot of these games here, definitely capable of cashing. It's just 2 3-pointers for my boy Peyton. So I'm at that. Put this on my short list. Let's have a look at his assists. His assist line is at 1.5. He's cashed this in 9 of his last 10 games, and in head-to-head matchups, 2 out of the 3 matchups against Miami this year, he's cashed this assist line. What did he play? 13, 23, and 15 minutes in those games. So you can see in these games, they were closely contested. He only got 13 and 15 minutes against Miami. Just checking to see some of these games here. He's gotten a lot of minutes, a lot of opportunities in recent times. So I'm not too sure on Peyton Pritchard. I'd have to look in a bit further than that. But yeah, not ultimately loving this game purely because of the blowout could occur. I don't know if it will, but it could. Boston well ahead of everybody else at this point in time. Miami just they're hanging by a thread. So yeah, I'm not too sure. But let's jump into the next game. It's the Dallas Mavericks versus the Los Angeles Clippers. Now I'm pretty excited for this game. I'm not going to get to watch it though. It's at 5 a.m. my time. But the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard is a game time decision, as well as Tim Hardaway. I doubt that Kawhi Leonard plays, though, from a lot of the updates. He's still pretty banged up. And in a 7-game series, do you really want to risk it all in game one? So we're not too sure about Kawhi. Let's look into Dallas, and then we'll jump into the Clippers, and we'll play around to see how people perform with and without Kawhi Leonard. Start with Luka Doncic, part owner of the LA Clippers. What do we see? He's hit this line in 4 of his last 10 games. Against the Clippers, though, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 6, averaging 34.8 points per game. So on the points front, 33.5, first game in the playoffs for the Mavericks this season. Yeah, I think the line's just about right. I've got no gut feel or indication he's going to go over or under, to be honest. Looking at his assists, the line's at 9.5. 5 out of his last 10. He's only covered this once in 6 games against the Los Angeles Clippers, but that was the last time that he faced them in December of this season. And if we look at his rebound line, that's at 9.5. I know a lot of people caught it at 8.5. I saw that in a few comments, but he's cashed the 9.5 in 6 of his last 10. He's cashed the 8.5 in 10 straight. Now, against the Clippers, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games. All of those games were this season. He went under his rebound line. Prior to that, in previous seasons, he had gone over. So I think what we need to factor in here over his last 10 games, he played 37 minutes a night. Against the Clippers, he's averaging about 39 minutes. He should see about 40 minutes in this game. So a lot of Luka. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a triple-double in this one. But in terms of finding a straight bet, which I'm really loving, I hate to say it, there's nothing for Luka here. But through these numbers, you might have found something that you like. Let's have a look at my man Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie, he's covered his points line here in 6 of his last 10 games, 2 out of the 3 games against the Los Angeles Clippers. In these games, though, only played 28 and 32 minutes in these games. Both of them, double-digit blowouts. Clippers had one, Mavs had one. I would like the over here because I think Kyrie should get close to 40 minutes tonight in this game. More minutes, more opportunities for my boy. And we've seen a lot of games here, big minutes, big points. Where he gets a lot of minutes, he gets a lot of points. As simple as that for Kyrie. Doesn't often get himself into foul trouble. First game of the playoffs that he's playing with the Mavericks, so I think he's going to be pretty this one, to be honest. And I'm also a little bit biased. I like Kyrie Irving. He's probably my favorite player right now. Looking at his assists, what do we see? 4.5's the line, 5 out of his last 10 games. Tough matchup here against the Clippers. Don't allow too many assists to 2 guards. And in head-to-head matchups, he's only cashed in 1 of the 3 games. So he did go under in his last 2. So I'm not loving the assist prop. I definitely like points prop a little bit more. And rebounds, 4.5's the line, 4 of his last 10, and he cashed in 2 out of his 3 games against the Clippers. And in these games, remember, 28, 32 minutes. Your boy should be seeing a lot more minutes. In terms of defensively, he's probably going to find himself on Terrence Mann. He'll probably most likely be defending Terrence Mann. So yeah, I think that it's a good rebounding spot here for Kyrie. We can definitely see that happening. I'm going to muck around with some filters because let's say Kyrie plays 38 minutes in this game. So this season, when Kyrie has played 38 minutes or more, he's covered this line of 4.5 rebounds in 11 of 16 games. Yet to verse the Clippers and play that many minutes, but he's averaging 5.5 rebounds when he plays this volume of minutes. The games he's gone under, the Warriors, the Kings, OKC, Brooklyn, and New York. But Yeah, I would lean to the over here. We've got great odds plus money for Kyrie's rebounds. You might even look at points plus rebounds for Kyrie. I wonder what that shows. Points plus rebounds in games where he plays over 28 minutes. Sorry, 38 minutes. All right, check this out. 15 out of 16 games where Kyrie Irving plays more than 38 minutes. He's covered this at 94% so far this season. Now, I'm not saying he will play 38 minutes. Like, I've just made this projection up, given the seriousness of the game, Tim Hardaway being a game time decision. Kyrie could be due for a big game here. Now, I'm interested to see what his points look like if we do the same filter. Kyrie, at 38 minutes this season, has covered this line in 15 of 16 games, averaging 32.8 points per game. So definitely due for some belters. But yeah, I like the points prop. I like his rebounds, especially if he's going to get the minutes here. Let's go Kyrie. All right. Who else have we got in this game for the Dallas Mavericks? There's Daniel Gafford, but I know he's got a tough matchup here against Ivica Zubac. He's yet to verse the Clippers since joining the Mavs, but the Clippers allow the fewest points to centers on the season. What's he got? 5 out of his last 10 he's cashed in. Nothing to get excited about there. Rebound, 6.5's the line. He has cashed in 4 of his last 10. So, yeah, highly inconsistent here for Gafford. In this particular matchup, look, he can probably get a couple of lobs on the pick and roll with Luka, that's for sure. If Zubac has to pick him up, I think there's a good. I'm not saying there's a great chance that it happens. Look, I think it'll happen at least once, but I don't know if he can cover his points line. That's what I'm saying. Who else do we have? I guess one person I'm thinking about, someone like Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington. These guys are going to get a lot of minutes, and that's purely they'll be on the court to get some defense in. So let's have a look at PJ Washington. Shoots terribly at times, but he gets so many open looks. So he's cashed his points line in 7 of his last 10 games. Similar to Gafford, hasn't versus the Clippers since the deadline. Now, if we look at positionally, the matchup's not too bad. But again, the Clippers, they do have some pretty good defenders on the wing, 3s and 4s. So I don't hate this play for PJ Washington. What's his 3-point line at? 1.5? Geez, that's not too bad for PJ Washington. We know he's going to get a lot of open looks. Have a look at his attempts. 6.7 attempts from downtown. His last 4 games, he was terrible. What's that? 7, 13, 19, 22. He made 5 out of 22 3-pointers to close the season in his last 4 games. So it really depends on whether he's going to shoot well or not. That's what I'm mostly worried about here. This is a road game, so I wonder what his last 10 road games look like. Last 10 games on the road, he's cashed this in 7 out of the 10 games. So it's not too bad. PJ Washington to get 2 3-pointers, might be able to fuck with it. Obviously, the Clippers, their game plan is going to do whatever you can to slow down Luka Doncic. And I think that's why Kyrie has a good chance to score some points here. But even someone like PJ Washington could take advantage of some open looks. Looking at his rebounds, 7 of his last 10 games, he's cashed this line, averaging 7.2 boards per game. Zubac and Gafford going to be battling down there. And we know that Luka doesn't necessarily have some great rebounding numbers against the Clippers this season. It could be someone like PJ Washington up these boards. Rebound chances, they're not the greatest, but I wanted to look at his minutes, actually. Let's play around with the minutes. 32 minutes a night. We've seen when games get highly competitive. That's an overtime game, but let's use this Golden State Warriors game as an example. When things get competitive, I can see him playing at least 36 minutes a night. If we look at PJ Washington, when he plays at least 36 minutes, covered this line in 7 of his last 10. These are Charlotte games. All right, so 4 games with Dallas playing more than 36 minutes, and he's covered this line in 3 out of the 4. Those are the same filters for his points. And the reason why I'm doing this is I haven't taken enough of the fact that it's the playoffs into consideration for a lot of my bets. A lot of it has been, let's just look at the recent form and the form against the opponent. But if we can project the minutes right, we'll get a good idea of what the opportunity is going to look like. So this is PJ Washington this season, playing at least 36 minutes. We know he's only played 4 games with Dallas where he's played more than 36 minutes. He scored 20, 19, 32, and 14 points in those games. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these were very high scoring games, and in the playoffs, we're probably not going to see that. This game is scheduled. The line for this game is at about 223, though. It's one of the highest lines you're going to see in the playoffs. A lot of the others are about 205, 210, perhaps. So Yeah, I don't mind this for PJ Washington. There's going to be points in this. Like for comparison, the next game, the Bucks game, that's a high line, but the Celtics Miami game, that's projected to be 209, and the Celtics have one of the best offenses in the league. That's at 209. This is at 223. So there's going to be some points in this one. PJ Washington could be a good recipient of this, I think. So covering in 4 straight, we just need to hope that he gets 36 minutes. That's my only worry at the moment because we don't know. But surely Dallas, a lot of the other teams, they're going to reduce the number of players that are going to be on the court. So they've got Luka, Kyrie, Derek Jones, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. By the looks of it, Dante Exum's going to get some time. Derek Lively will get some time. And probably Maxi Kleber, I would say, or Tim Hardaway Jr. He might get a bit too. So they might go 9 deep into their bench. But ultimately, PJ Washington, he should get more time because the Clippers, PG, Kawhi, Kawhi. I don't even know if Kawhi's going to play. I doubt that he does, but yeah, I don't mind. Maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into the PJ Washington play. Yeah, potentially. Well, look at Derek Lively. So Derek Lively's had a pretty decent game against the Clippers in the past. He hasn't played a game in 3 weeks though, so that's something I'm a bit worried about. He scored 6 points against the Clippers last time, so nothing amazing. He did cover this line, however, but now his role's a little bit different. He was starting back then. Now he is back on the bench. Let's have a look at these Clippers. Let's have a look. I'm going to make the assumption here that Kawhi Leonard is not going to play. Let me see if there's any report on Kawhi Leonard. So right knee inflammation. I'm bringing up what is it? ESPN injuries report right now, just to see what's the latest update on Kawhi Leonard. What have they said? So let's see. Los Angeles Clippers, we've got an update. This update was yesterday. He's questionable to play Sunday against the Mavericks. So that doesn't give us too much detail. Doing a quick Google search. And this is one thing I encourage you guys to do when you do your research. If you find a player that you like, something I always recommend to a lot of the people I've coached in the past is to Google the player, check the news, see what they're going on. It could be a birthday, an ex-girlfriend, trauma, star signs. There's sometimes there's some bit of juice that tells you, yeah, I really should bet this, and other times like I'll probably avoid him tonight. So, all right. So what does it say? Kawhi Leonard has been sidelined with right knee inflammation. His status is still in jeopardy. Is he playing tonight? So Ty Lue told the media that he has been shooting and will shoot more with the team today. He hasn't said that he's been running. He hasn't been cleared for contact. He shot yesterday. He was on the floor. He was able to shoot more with a little bit more movement, and he's got through some of the practice as well. PG may have unintentionally admitted that Leonard would not be ready for the first game of the series. I do think at some point he will be with us. He said that on media day. So, yeah, a lot of the comments coming out make it out like Kawhi's not going to play. So I'm going to assume that he's not going to give you guys a more accurate preview when looking at these lines and the form. But let's have a look at James Harden. His points line, 18.5 here. Mavs, pretty good defensively this year, especially in the second half, but pretty good defensively against point guards all year. In head-to-head matchups, James Harden has scored 14, 8, and 17 points against Dallas. Now, let's check out James Harden without Kawhi Leonard. Now, in his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard, James Harden is averaging 16 points per game. He's covered this line in 4 out of his last 10 games. Now, there was one game here against Utah where he only played 10 minutes, so willing to forgive that. That's 18.5 against Dallas. Yeah, I don't love this one for James Harden. I'd probably lean to the under, to be honest. Just where my mind goes. If you take the under on James Harden, under 18.5, it's plus money. So that's one lean of mine. Let's have a look at the assists. Last 10 games, 4 of his last 10. He covered this in 1 of 3 games against Dallas, had 11 assists the last time they played. But keeping in mind, all 3 of these games were before the deadline, and Dallas has only improved since then. If we look at his assists without Kawhi Leonard in the lineup, in his last 10 games, he's covered this 9.5 line in 3 out of those 10 games. But we have to be conscious here that James Harden is going to play a lot of minutes. So I should have done this. I'm going to do this on the points thing. He averaged 32 minutes a night in his last 10. On the season, 34.3 minutes. So let's run his minutes up, for example's sake, to 38. Let's just check his games where he plays 38 minutes. In games where he plays at least 38 minutes, James Harden has covered this line in 7 out of his last 10, averaging 19.6. Right? Now, if we run the same thing where he's played that many minutes without Kawhi Leonard, what do we see? Without Kawhi, let's go this year. All right. 3 out of 4 games without Kawhi Leonard where he's played more than 38 minutes. This season, he's cashed in 3 out of the 4. So that's not excellent for those looking at the under. And this season without Kawhi, 19 games where he's played at least 38 minutes. James Harden has covered in 12 out of 19 games. So, yeah, it might look easy to take the under because his recent form hasn't been great and all that stuff. But after toying around with it, I'm going to delete this under from my list. I don't want to take that and get surprised. Let's run the same example on his assists. 38 minutes, 2023. So in 19 games where he's played at least 38 minutes, James Harden has covered this line in 9 of those games. So 47% hit rate. So you can't help but lean to the under. Let's have a look at the 4 games without Kawhi Leonard where he played this many minutes, and he only cashed this in 1 of the 4 games. So I feel like the way that Dallas have been playing defense to close out the year, I feel like they can really minimize the assists here, though, from James Harden to turn him into a scorer. They've got some versatile wings that can close out quite well. They've got some rim protection, so a lot of the pick and roll stuff may not work. I think we might see a lot of ISO stuff for Paul George. So I think James Harden under 9.5 assists might be something I can get around today. But let's see. So my last video obviously didn't look too much into minutes played and things like that. I think that's probably one area where I dropped the ball. But let's have a look at his boards. 4 of his last 10 games, and he went under his rebound line in 3 games against Dallas this year. Let's assume he plays at least 38 minutes here to give us an indication. Some playoff basketball. 7 out of his last 10 games. 9 out of 19 games he's hit this line. So similar to his assist prop. Same hit rate. Yeah, so there's nothing too convincing on the rebound side of things, to be honest. I think, yeah, he could definitely get 5.5 rebounds, playing more minutes. No Kawhi Leonard. Let's check it out without Kawhi. I'm going to assume that he's got a good hit rate here. Yeah, it's not too bad. 3 out of the 4 games without Kawhi Leonard, where he played 38 minutes, James Harden collected these boards. So 3 out of the 4. So yeah, I can definitely see him getting them. But there's also, there could be some unlikely blowouts. They seem to be happening every single day. Who got blown out today? The Phoenix Suns. They got blown out by the Minnesota Timberwolves, which absolutely smoked my bets. So even though the line for that game was like 1.5, it was like a 25-point win, right? So, and I think if there is a blowout in this game, I have a feeling Dallas will be doing the blowing based on recent form and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, I think Dallas is the stronger team now. Kawhi at full strength. I think that tips it in favor of the Clippers, but he's clearly not at full strength, and he's most likely not even going to play this game. So, all right. Who else have we got? Let's look at PG. Let's dive in deep on PG. So he's covered this points line in 4 out of his last 10 games. He's gone under in consecutive games against the Dallas Mavericks. All of these games are regular season games, though, so let's not overreact. Now, I want to have a look at his last 10 games. He's playing 32 minutes a night. On the season, he's playing 33.8 minutes a night. So let's say, similar to James, he plays 38 minutes. Playoff basketball, right? So PG this season playing 38 more has covered this points line in only 6 of 17 games. That's not great. In head-to-head matchups, only 1 matchup against Dallas. This was back in 2022, so I'm not too worried about that. Now let's have a look at those games where he plays more than 38 minutes and Kawhi Leonard is missing. Now it looks a little bit different, right? So he's covered this line in 5 of 7 games where he plays more than 38 minutes with Kawhi out of the lineup, which is probably why we see the line at 25.5. If you just looked at the regular last 10s, or if you looked at just the head-to-head matchups, you could be fooled into taking the under. But yeah, I think you can't help but lean to the over here. I would probably lean to the over for PG more than anybody else. Because looking at this roster, PG is probably the only man that can create his own shot in this one. I don't know if James Harden has that ability anymore. I think PG can. I mean, on his day, could score with some of the best. So, look, PG overs, that might be something that I could be willing to take, but I'll investigate that one a little bit more. Let's look at his assists. His line's at 3.5, 4 of his last 10. And 4 out of his last 5 against Dallas, he's cashed this assist, which is pretty good. Only 2 of these games were this year, though. He had 2 assists and 4 assists in another. I think the assist prop, you factor in that defenses do improve in the postseason. I wonder what his assist numbers look like without Kawhi Leonard first, then we'll get the minutes thing happening. So without Kawhi Leonard this season, 5 out of 11 games he's covered his assist line, so it's not great. Let's do games where PG plays at least 38 minutes. 17 games this season, he's cashed this in 9 of 17. So his last 5 games, playing this volume of minutes, he's cashed this assist line. He had 6 assists against Dallas, but again, back in 2022. And then if we take out Kawhi Leonard as well, so PG's had 2 games this year where he's played at least 38 minutes and Kawhi Leonard wasn't there. In those games, 7 assists against the Cavaliers and 5 assists against the Phoenix Suns. Looking at his last 10, what do we have? These are games without Kawhi. So 6 out of his last 7 games, dating back to last season without Kawhi Leonard, where he plays more than 38 minutes, he's cashed his assist prop. But I'm more focused in on what happened this year, to be honest, because these were a very long time ago. So that's the Cavs and the Phoenix game. And this is a low-scoring game, 105 to 92, and he still managed to get 5 assists. And I think that just comes with the territory of having a higher usage rate. So, yeah, I don't mind Paul George's assists. We'll look into that. We'll see what could happen in this. All right, who the hell else have we got? We got Norman Powell. I think Norman Powell could be a good look. He'll be the first man to step up off the bench, get some time. Now, if you're looking at recent form, a lot of it's going to be a little bit cray. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Against Dallas, your boy's been cooking. He's covered in the last 2 games. He's also covered in 5 of his last 7 games against Dallas, which is pretty wild. Dallas defending 2 guards. They don't do the best job of it because it's usually Kyrie Irving, I would assume. But these numbers against Dallas are pretty good. In the last 10 are a bit, how you going? But back end of the season, Clippers, I don't know if they were tanking or what, but Norman Powell, he was seeing almost 28 minutes at the bench in his last 10 games, and a lot of that was without Kawhi Leonard, I'm going to assume. So if you take Kawhi Leonard out, this season he's played 12 games without Kawhi Leonard. He's covered this line in 5 out of 12 games. He was playing 27 minutes a night in those games without Kawhi. Now, the question is, do we see more minutes for Norman Powell because Kawhi Leonard is out and it's the playoffs? I feel like you will only see more minutes for Norman Powell if he's having a positive impact in this game. So he's played, yeah. So I'm not going to play around with the minutes filter for Norman Powell. This matchup stuff against Dallas this season, that is interesting, even the past seasons. But this Dallas before the trade deadline were a terrible defensive team. Last year, they were a terrible defensive team as well. So I don't want to overreact here to Norman Powell and how he's performed against Dallas in the past. So, yeah, I'm just going to watch with interest for Norman Powell. I'm not going to take any bets on that. But I feel like that's an interesting insight. We've got Zubac. His points line is 11.5. He's cashed this in 6 out of his last 10. And against Dallas, he's only cashed in 2 out of his 7 games. In his last 10 games, 27.2 minutes a night. We can see that he's seen highs of about minutes. So that might be his ceiling in terms of minutes. Dallas actually defends centers quite well this year. So Zubac's had his troubles in the past with them. I'm not too interested in looking at a points prop for Zubac, to be honest. Looking at his rebound line, 9.5 though. 7 out of his last 10. But he's covered this in only 2 of 7 games against the Dallas Mavericks. And the Mavs have only gotten better at rebounding since he last played them. So I don't know if a lot of this is making me think there could be a lot of unders play here for the Clippers. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm man enough to take that. Let's have a look at Russell Westbrook, my boy. I do wish Russell Westbrook does well. I hope he wins something towards his back end of his career, but highly unlikely. But let's talk about it. His points line's at 10.5. He's cashed in 6 out of his last 10. Against Dallas, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3 games. 14, 14, and 10 points against the Mavs. 2 games in November and a game in December. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see it. I just think it's highly unlikely. Looking at his assist prop, though, 3.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games. And in head-to-head matchups, 1 of 3 games. Actually, let's do some Kawhi stuff here. Let's check out the games without Kawhi this season. All right. Westbrook's played in 11 games without Kawhi this year. He's covered this points line in 9 out of the 11 games, averaging 13.3 points per game. Looking at his minutes, averaging about 25 minutes a night without Kawhi Leonard. But that's also including this Utah game where he only played 9 minutes, clearly rested up for the playoffs. But yeah, I think he's good for at least 25 minutes. So we could muck around with the filters to see his games of playing 25 minutes or more. But no, actually, we probably don't need to. Just looking at the games without Kawhi Leonard is probably good enough. 9 out of 11 games without Kawhi, which is pretty good. Looking at his assists without Kawhi Leonard, his line is at 3.5. He's cashed this in 9 of 11 games without Kawhi Leonard. And if we look at his rebounds, that line is at 3.5. Without Kawhi, Russ has covered this in 9 of 11 games. So, is there a sign here? 9 out of 11 games for points, rebounds, and assists for Russ. Do we just take the PRA? Is what I'm thinking. So his PRA in this game is 17.5. He's cashed in 63% of the games he played this year. So his lines are a lot lower than what we have been seeing. If we look at it without Kawhi Leonard, he's cashed in 10 out of 11 games. So even better. So the PRA might be there. Or Kawhi Leonard plays and we get absolutely smoked. So Russ this year with Kawhi Leonard has still cashed this line 33 out of 57 games this year. So 58%. He actually cashed this line in all 3 head-to-head games against Dallas this season. But like I mentioned before, Dallas has improved offensively since this point. So he may not have his own way the way he normally would have. But yeah, Westbrook PRA does have my attention. It also has me questioning because this line is low. And given his performance without Kawhi Leonard is so strong, wouldn't that mean that his line would be a lot higher if Kawhi Leonard was not expected to play? Or are they not sure if he's going to play? And then this line will move up once Kawhi Leonard is confirmed out. My God, my head is spinning. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure at all. But let's jump into the next game. I don't know how long I've been hammering on about this, but yeah, it's been a long time. Indiana versus the Bucks. Let's talk about this one. We've got Giannis. I don't think Giannis is not playing in this one, but let's get through all these key players. The line in this game, let me just double check what the line is. The line for this game is Indiana minus 1.5. I think you could have get them. Indiana were underdogs for over the last week coming into this game, and given the recent outs and team changes, that's definitely swung. So Pacers favorites on the road in Milwaukee. Know about it. Who we got? Let's get through these Bucks first because I feel like let's look at Dame. So Dame's points line 28.5. He's cashed in 4 of his last 10 games. He's only cashed this in 0 out of the 4 games against the Pacers this year. So he struggled against Indiana, but this is the playoffs. Dame has stepped up in the playoffs before. Not to win a series, but he's won some games. If we look at his games without Giannis, though, he's cashed this line in 7 of his last 10 games without Giannis, averaging 29 points per game. Yet to verse the Pacers with Giannis. But this season, yeah, he's played actually 6 out of 8 games this year without Giannis. He's cashed this line for a 75% hit rate. If we look at the teams against the Raptors, Clippers, Suns, Celtics, Raptors, and the Magic. In terms of Indiana's defense, they actually defend point guards quite well. 6 fewest points to point guards on the season, which is partly why Dame has struggled to score against Indiana all year. So the point side of the thing, I don't love for Dame. If we look at his assists, though, the Pacers allow the fewest assists to point guards. He's hit this in 37% of games this year, 3 out of his last 10. And against the Pacers, he's gone under in all 4 games as well. So being absolutely clamped. So let's check out his numbers without Giannis, though. This season, without Giannis, he's covered this line in 3 of the 8 games without Giannis, 7.5. How can you not take Dame under points and assists in this game, though? Well, there is a chance that he scored 40 points, right? It is the playoffs. Now, in these games without Giannis, 35 minutes a night. If we just have a look at Dame on the season, what's he getting? Dame on the season, 35 minutes. So I reckon he could potentially play 40 minutes in this game. If we look at in the games where Dame played at least 40 minutes, he's cashed this in 4 out of 6 games where he plays 40 minutes. But one of the games where he played more than 40 minutes was up against Indiana, and he still went under his assist prop. With or without Giannis, he has struggled to make this happen. Let's run the same filter on his points. Games where Dame plays 40 minutes. So he's only cashed his points line in 2 out of 6 games where he plays more than 40 minutes. If we see how many games without Giannis where he's played 40 minutes, it was up against the Clippers and he scored 41 points. But that is the Clippers after all. They don't defend point guards the way that the Indiana Pacers do. So I'm feeling an under for his points and assists could make my short list here. Let's have a look at it. That's without Giannis. So this season, yeah, he's gone under 36.5 points and assists in only 2 of 8 games. What the hell am I looking at? Because he had some good scoring games. My bad. Let's look at. So he's gone over 36.5 points plus assists without Giannis. I'm getting so confused. What is going on here? But look at his points without Giannis. Let's do this again. All right, he's covered his points line in 6 of 8. So points is good. He's made that happen. That's why his points plus assists. Right. I'm with you. Losing my mind here, lads. But he has struggled against the Indiana Pacers before, but he's yet to verse the Pacers without Giannis. So taking the straight under for Dame, probably a little bit risky because we don't know what he's going to do without Giannis. Giannis played in all 4 of these games against Indiana. He actually had some great games against Indiana too. So Dame, not necessarily required to go to work here. So I apologize. I might have spent too much time here on Dame and got nowhere with it. But this is what it's like when you're doing research on the picks that you've seen for the first time. You can get a little bit sloppy. Someone I am interested in looking at, though, is Bobby Portis. We've seen Bobby have some big games without Giannis. Well, it feels like he has. You know, he's got a good matchup. The Pacers don't defend the rim very well. They don't defend forwards very well, full stop. Now, Bobby's hit this line in 4 of his last 10 games, averaging 15.8. But let's not fuck around and put the Giannis filter on. All right. This season, in 9 games without Giannis, Bobby Porter has... Bobby Porter. Bobba. Anyway, Bobby Portis... Fuck. I got Tourette's. Bobby Portis cashed this line in 6 of 9 games without Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's hit this at a hit rate. The games he's gone under. Cleveland, Orlando, OKC, all very good defensive teams. So this Indiana Pacers team, not a great defensive team. They just like to push the pace, get buckets, get money. Anyway, so he's done quite well against them. Let's show head-to-head matchups. So he's versed the Indiana Pacers once without Giannis in the lineup. He scored 21 points. That was last season, though. If we just have a look at his games against Indiana as of late, 2 of 8 he's covered in, averaging 12.5 points per game. But we can see here, in a lot of these games, he's playing about 20 minutes a night. If we have a look at his last 10 games, let's look at his games this season without Giannis. What type of minutes are we getting? Bobby is seeing 28.4 minutes a night. This was a blowout. They got blown out by OKC, so he only played 21 minutes. In this game against Cleveland, that was a blowout too, so he only got 21 minutes. So I'm going to play around the filters. I'm going to set it to 30 for Bobby. See what type of numbers Bobby can do in 30 minutes. Looking at the head-to-head stuff, played 30 minutes twice against the Pacers, both of those last season, so that's no good. All right, 2023, Bobby Portis playing 30 minutes a night. What do we see? 5 out of 12. Averaging 16 points per game in those games. So that's not great, but I really think it's the Giannis thing, right? No Giannis, where he plays more than 30 minutes. All right. This changes to 3 out of 4, averaging 22.25 points per game. He's got a good matchup here. Fuck it. I've talked myself into it. Bobby Portis, deliver for me, please. All right, let's look at his rebounds. Rebounds, he's cashed in 1 of his last 10. Against the Pacers, he's only cashed in 1 of 8. So none of that is good. Let's have a quick look at Giannis. Games without Giannis in 2023, he's cashed this line in 2 out of 9 games. The 3 games where he played more than 30 minutes, he had 10, 9, 15. That game he had 16. So I'm not loving Bobby Porter's rebounds, but his points I can get around. Who else we got? We got Fishface Middleton. Let's have a look at Fishface. So Chris Middleton's hit this line in 3 of his last 10. He's only hit it 1 out of 7 games against the Indiana Pacers. His games without Giannis this year, Chris Middleton, 3 out of his last 7. And games without Giannis against Indiana, he's got none. So looking at his last 10 games, what type of minutes are we seeing from Middleton? Because he does go up and down. Gets injured a lot, old fish face. So his points prop, not loving, 20.5. I don't like that. The matchup's not too bad, though. They do give a lot of points to his position. His assists, 6.5 is the line. He's cashed in 3 of his last 10. He's cashed in 2 out of the 3 games. Oh, actually, 2 out of the 4 games against Indiana this year. Seeing how he plays without Giannis. And he's only cashed in 2 of his last 10 games without Giannis, 1 out of 7 games this season. So, yeah, I feel like the assist line, obviously you're getting plus money for the 6.5, so I'd lean to the under for sure. If we're looking at rebounds, his line's at 6.5. He's cashed this in 4 of his last 10, and against the Pacers, only 2 out of his last 7. But again, you've got to factor in Giannis in here. But he's only cashed this in 1 of his last 10 games without Giannis, 1 of 7 of the games this year. So that game, he only played 23 minutes. So Chris Middleton, his lines have moved up quite a lot. I don't see him absolutely smacking them out of the park. Player to look at here is Brook Lopez. Now, Brook Lopez, similar to Bobby Portis, has some wonderful numbers without Giannis. His line's at 13.5. He's cashed this in 4 of his last 10. And against Indiana, he's had a lot of success. 6 out of his last 8 games against the Pacers, he's got it done. If we take a look at his last 10 games without Giannis, what do we see? This season, he's only cashed this line 2 out of 9 games without Giannis. So that's interesting. In head-to-head matchups, 1 game without Giannis back last year, he scored 19 points against the Pacers. So my thought process is here, looking at games this year, Brook Lopez been healthy all year. He plays 25 minutes a night without Giannis, which I feel like that doesn't change. So with or without Giannis, Brook Lopez still plays the same amount of minutes. I want to look at his first quarter points without Giannis because I know he's done this quite well. He has hit this in 9 consecutive games, over 3.5 points. Hasn't got it done against Indiana very well. 1 of the 4 games against them this year. If we look at the numbers without Giannis, last 10 games without Giannis, yeah, it's okay. It's not worth bragging about. What else is there? Rebounds from Brook Lopez, 5.5. He's only hit this in 2 of his last 10. Only 1 of 4 games against the Pacers without Giannis. 3 of his last 10 games without Giannis in the lineup. So, yeah, not loving Brook. Bobby might be our guy in this one. All right, let's have a look at these Indiana Pacers. Sorry, this video is long as hell, so I'm going to be vaping because I need the extra power. Now look at these Indiana Pacers, right? A lot of them on the board. We'll start off with the big fish first, and then we'll see if we can find some value. Tyrese Halliburton. Let's look at Hallie. His points line, 19.5. The Milwaukee Bucks have not defended point guards very well all year. So my gut feel is take the over. But let's look at some numbers. 5 out of his last 10 games, he's gone over this line. Against the Bucks, he's absolutely smoked them, averaging 27 points per game in 5 games against the Bucks. Tyrese Halliburton don't give a buck. So I like this already. There's no lineup changes. We need to filter out for Tyrese. Now, his last 10 games, he's playing 32 minutes on average. This is a playoff game after all, so we can expect more. Against the Bucks, a 35-minute average. So if we get on the season, Halliburton averaged 32 minutes a night, and there was a stretch where he had minutes restrictions and stuff. So I'm going to project his minutes to about 36, given the magnitude of this game. Tyrese Halliburton playing more than 36 minutes this year has cashed this line in 15 of 19 games. And we obviously know he's got that massive streak against the Milwaukee Bucks. So that might be one that we lock in as well. Tyrese Halliburton over his points prop. I do like that. And what else have we got? Assists for Hallie. Now, in his last, he's averaging 9 assists. His line's at 10.5. It's still plus money. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. Against the Bucks, he's hit this in 3 out of 4 games this season. 3 out of his last 5. In those 3 games he hit, 36 minutes, and 34 minutes. So when the minutes are there, your boy be stroking. In this particular game, he only played 30 minutes. The Pacers lost by 14. He only had 7 assists. And then this game was last season. If we muck around with the filters here and we say Hallie's going to play 36, what do we see? This season, where Hallie plays 36 minutes or more, he's cashed this assist line in 14 of 19 games. So pretty good hit rate. Not as good as his points hit rate, not going to lie, but he has got it done before, for those of you who are interested. And we can't not look at his 3-point prop. Head-to-head, he's hit this in 3 or 5 against the Bucks, 7 out of his last 10 games. But I do like his points prop more than anything. A lot of transition stuff, a lot of Pally. Now let's look at Pascal Siakam, Spicy P. Now he's cashed this line in 3 out of his last 10 games, yet to verse the Bucks since he joined the Pacers. The Bucks pretty good at defending fours, but again, there's no Giannis. Pascal, 7 of his last 10. He's averaging only 29.7 minutes a game, though. This guy felt like he played 40 minutes a night for years. Let's just say Pascal can get at least 34 minutes of runtime in this game. This season, playing more than 34 minutes, only averaging 22 points per game. So, not loving that. His points prop. Looking at his assist prop, 2.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. So, I don't love that. And his rebounds. He did start rebounding well towards the end of the season. Cashed in 3 out of his last 10. So, that's not great. This season, he's only cashed in 21 of 80 games. So, this rebound line. So, you can see it on this graph here towards the back quarter of the season. Did start to rebound a lot better. The pace will be high in this game. There could be a lot of chances, but Pascal, not feeling you, my boy. Miles Turner, let's have a look at Miles Turner. His points line, 16.5. 5 out of his last 10 games he's cashed in head-to-head matchups against the Bucks. 5 out of his last 8. However, he's cashed in 2 or 4 against the Bucks this year. His last 2 games against them, he did go under. So the Bucks do allow a lot of points to centers, though. So surprising to see he hasn't done so well in the past. We see this season, what's his minutes at? 26.9 minutes against the Bucks, 32.2 minutes against the Bucks. So if we can project, look, use an outlier here, looking at Miles Turner over 32 minutes a night. This year, he's done that 10 times. He's cashed this line in 8 of 10 games where he's played at least 32 minutes. The matchup is pretty good too. I know his last 2 games weren't great against the Bucks, but when he's versed the Bucks and played at least 32 minutes, he's cashed this in 4 consecutive games. The question is, does Miles Turner actually play 32 minutes? So the Pacers are at full strength. I think it makes sense to play him as many minutes as you possibly can, but we do have Jalen Smith off the bench, Obi Toppin as well. They're not as big as Miles Turner, but I think this is worth looking into. Let's not limit our opportunities here. And then we'll look at his rebounds line. I probably won't like this. Sometimes it's tough to rebound against Brook Lopez. What do we see? 4 out of his last 8 games against the Bucks. 2 games he went under his points. He also went under in his rebounds because he played less minutes. Looking at his last 10 games, he's hit this in only 2 of his last 10. So you're going to be a crazy bastard to bet on Miles Turner's rebounds. If we look at the games where he plays at least 32 minutes on the year, 5 out of 10 his last 10. Yeah, so his rebound line, not feeling that for Miles Turner. Who else do we have? I think the only other ones that may be worth looking at. Obi Toppin was great to finish the year. I'm going to show you this, but I'm not saying to bet this. He's hit this line in 9 out of his last 10 games, 6.5. His minutes from anywhere from 25 to 12 minutes, and he still managed to cash it somehow. And against the Milwaukee Bucks, he's covered this in 4 of his last 5 games, 3 out of the 4 games this season. The last 2 games against the Bucks, 29 and 26.8 minutes. So you can see Obi Toppin most likely was stealing minutes from Miles Turner in these last 2 games. So Turner's minutes were down in these last 2. Obi Toppin's was, it's just this last one actually. But Obi Toppin probably came back from injury and has impacted others. So I think the question is Obi Toppin going to get minutes? He might get 12, could get 15. We know he can get this number in limited time. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I am not too sure. Look at TJ McConnell because he can have a lot of impact in a minimal amount of time. So he's cashed this line of 11.5 in 8 out of his last 10 games. Against the Bucks, he's cashed this in 5 of his last 8, but only 1 of 4 games this season. So I do not like that. Looking at his assist prop, 5.5. He's cashed this in 6 of his last 10, and against the Bucks, look very similar. 5 out of his last 8, 1 of 4 this season. And why is that? His minutes against the Bucks have been somewhat inconsistent. In the past, he was playing a much bigger role for this Pacers team. So I'm not sure. Look, TJ McConnell probably has a smashing game in limited minutes, and I kick myself for not taking any bets on him, but this is the playoffs, baby. I don't want role players. It's also not too long from game time, so I'm going to try to fucking speed shit up right here. Let's get into this New Orleans Pelicans versus OKC Thunder game. Zion Williamson is still out. I'm just checking the spread real quick. The total is at 214. The spread here is OKC minus 8.5 against the Pellies. Let's talk about it. Let's get these Pellies out of the way first. We'll start with Brandon Ingram. Now, Brandon Ingram's mid-range game is fire. He looks so good in that last game against the Kings. Some clutch buckets. But his recent form's not great. He's hit this in 2 out of his last 10. Matchups difficult here against OKC. In head-to-head matchups, he has cashed in 2 out of his last 3. But he's only played them once this season, and he scored 12 points in that game. The one thing I need to show you about Brandon Ingram is how well he plays without Zion Williamson. Check this out. This season, he's played 10 games without Zion. He's cashed this in 6 out of the last 10. In these games, he sucked ass, but he didn't have big minutes. Didn't get big minutes at all. He played 37 minutes in that game against the Sacramento Kings. There's a chance of a blowout in this game, but yeah, I'm not too sure about Brandon Ingram's points prop in this one. His assists, though, line's only moved up. He's got a matchup here against OKC compared to the Kings. His line for that Kings game was 18.5. It's now moved up to 20.5. I don't feel like taking that. His assist line, 5.5. He's cashed in 4 of his last 10. And against OKC, he has cashed in 2 out of 3. The only game he played against OKC this year, he did have 9 assists, and the Pelicans lost that game by 24 points. He played 33 minutes. He had 19 potential assists. So the assists could be something that I could get around here for Brandon Ingram. And if we look at his last 10 games without Zion, he's hit this line in 10 games without Zion, which is pretty wild. Now, OKC, not the best defensive team. They're pretty decent defensively, but at the same time, they're the first game in the playoffs. They could be a little bit rattled. First game for a few of them. Brandon Ingram assists. Could be mucking around with that. Minus 135 I do not like, but we'll do some line shopping, see what we can find. His rebound prop is at 5.5. 4 of his last 10. 1 out of 3 against OKC. Matchup is difficult as well. So, yeah, I'm not loving what I'm seeing there for BI rebounds. We've got CJ McCollum. Now, CJ, 7 out of his last 10 games. The minute Brandon Ingram came back, CJ's points have just plummeted, right? If we look at head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 3 of 6 games without OKC. If we look at games without Zion, he's cashed this in only 1 of 4 games against OKC. Last 10 games without Zion, he's cashed this in 4 out of his last 10. But if we look at his last 10 games without Zion and with Brandon Ingram, 4 out of his last 10, averaging 17 points per game, and he's gone under the last 2 games against OKC. So, difficult matchup here. OKC defend point guards quite well. I can't help it, but I thought about it in the last game and I didn't take it. I feel like I have to take it now. It's a CJ under in points. I just don't think he'll be able to produce against this OKC team based off what I know. So, yeah, let's look at 2023. So he's had 7 games with Brandon Ingram and without Zion. He's only covered this line twice. Once against Washington. Pelicans scored 142 points in that game, and a 33 blowout win to Sacramento. So the Pels scored 142 and 133 in the 2 games where CJ McCollum was able to cover this line. They're not scoring over 130 points against OKC here in the playoffs, I'll tell you that. So, yeah, I do like the under. Looking at his assists, 4.5, 6 out of his last 10. He's covered this in 4 of his last 6 against OKC. Let's apply the same filters. Let's not muck around. Without Zion, with Brandon Ingram, under in both games against OKC. And then this season, he's gone on over in 2 of 7 games. Now, yeah, I'm not a big fan of CJ assists anyway, but yeah, 4.5, I'm not a big fan of, to be honest. So, look, we might take a complete fade on CJ for a value play, under points, under assists. Let's have a look at his rebounds. We might take the under on that too. But hasn't been rebounding well. Last 2 games since BI came back, his rebounds are down. Head-to-head, though, he has rebounded well against OKC. 4.5 rebounds is plus money. He's not going to be the primary defender on SGA anyway. That's most likely going to be Herb Jones. Trey Murphy might have a taste. It's definitely not going to be CJ McCollum. I can see CJ McCollum would be defending Josh Giddey or Lou Dort or something like that. So I think the rebound play could be a good one. Let's just check out his numbers without Zion, with Brandon Ingram. He's hit this assist rebound line once, 1 out of 2. And then this season, he's cashed this rebound line in 4 out of 7 games. Unfortunately, that last game against the Kings, he didn't get any boards, which was a surprise. but when you got De'Aaron Fox running it down your throat, probably makes it a little bit difficult. But yeah, I don't mind this. I want to look at Trey Murphy's rebounds before I make any commitments to CJ McCollum's here, but I do like fading McCollum's points and his assists. Let's have a look at Trey Murphy. Where's Trey? Here he is. His line's at 15.5 for old Trey Murphy. I think for OKC, the only weak spot they have defensively is whoever Josh Giddey picks up, and Josh Giddey will most likely be on Herb Jones, I think. Could be Trey Murphy, right? But his points line is at 15.5, 6 of his last 10, 4 of 7. Now let's apply these same filters because Zion moves lines, changes the way that they play. Without Zion, but with Brandon Ingram in the lineup, Trey Murphy has cashed this line in 4 of 7 games this season, averaging 17.8 points per game. We'll have to look at how he scores. So looking at the games against OKC, 1 out of his last 3 games with Ingram and without Zion, he's cashed in. So might not be the best play for Trey Murphy. Let's have a look at his rebound line, though. Actually, look at his assists because he got some assists in that last game. 6 assists, to be exact. But he showed off a skill set I didn't know that he had. Without Zion, with Brandon Ingram, what do we see? This year, he's cashed in 4 out of 7 games, averaging 2.8 assists. OKC, not the greatest at limiting assists, to be honest. So a bit of team basketball never hurt. So he played 43 minutes in that game against Sacramento too. So he could have some good opportunities here. 2.5. I want to look at his potential assists. He only had 5 potential assists or something like that. But yeah, pretty crazy stat lines here for Trey Murphy. I feel like this could be, if he's going to play 35 to 40 minutes, you only need 3 assists. I don't mind that for Trey. Let's check his rebounds out. 5.5. I took his under against the Kings. God damn, I'm stupid sometimes. But this OKC team, if there is a weak point, they don't rebound very well. Now, Trey's cashed this in 6 of his last 10. He cashed it in his last 2 games against OKC. In those games, he actually has played a lot of minutes against OKC in the past. But yeah, he has been rebounding quite well towards the back end of this season. Let's check his numbers out without Zion, with Brandon Ingram in 2023. 4 out of his last 7 games, he's covered this rebound line. And in head-to-head matchups, the only game he played against OKC this year where the Pelicans got pumped, Zion didn't play that game, Brandon Ingram did, and he finished on 7 rebounds. So I like the rebounds line here as well. What I'm actually considering doing is looking at his rebounds plus assists. 8.5 plus money. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. He hasn't hit it against OKC before, but I'm not too worried about that. Let's have a look at this. Without Zion, with BI. Yeah, it's not that great, to be honest. It really does lend into his recent form. His assist numbers have been great in only 2 games where he's covered that line. But we're also going to see him get more minutes, you know what I'm saying? So maybe if we remove these filters and we just change his minutes filters to 35 minutes. Trey Murphy getting 35 minutes. He's done it 12 times this season, and he's hit this line 9 out of the 12 games. He hasn't got it done against OKC, but a lot of this was last season. And Trey Murphy this season feels a little bit different to me. Be yamming on people's heads. And that's the thing with these younger players. You can't look too much into their form against the opponent, especially if it was last year. They could really improve. So I'll have a closer look at Trey Murphy. The last one I want to look at for the Pels is Jonas Valanciunas. So every man and his dog was on Jonas Valanciunas against Domantas Sabonis, a bit of Lithuanian on Lithuanian crime. Now you can see he's cashed this line in 3 of his last 10, not overly impressive. In head-to-head matchups, he's done okay against OKC in the past. Struggled the last time they played. What's the bet his minutes went there? Yeah, he only played 10 minutes in that last game because this OKC team plays a lot faster than that Kings team in terms of pace. Where's OKC in terms of pace? OKC, the pace factor, 7th fastest pace in the league. They've all got bigs that can run. So Jonas might not get any game time here. So I'm not loving the points prop, to be honest. With or without Zion, I feel like the game might be too fast for him. I think the only props I would consider for Jonas Valanciunas would be in the first quarter because at least we know he's going to minutes. His points line is 3.5, but in head-to-head matchups, he hasn't got it done. 2 out of 8 games against OKC. So you might look at his first quarter rebounds. That's at 2.5. He has cashed that in his last 2 games. and in head-to-head matchups. He did cash in 2 out of the 3 matchups against OKC this year, though. 3 and 5 rebounds, and he did that playing only 5 minutes. And this is what I mean. Like, OKC present a problem. Jonas probably not going to get as many minutes as you would like. He'll start the game for sure. But if OKC start running and they're running early, they could run this man off the court and he'll never get back on. So the first quarter rebound prop, I don't mind for Jonas Valanciunas. Let me put that onto my short list and let's find somebody else to talk to. Who we got? We got Shai Gilgeous over 28.5 points. His cash is in only 2 of his last 10, but he was cruising towards the end of the year. This is the playoffs after all. In head-to-head matchups, he's done quite well against the Pels. His cash is in 5 out of his last 8 games against them. He averaged 38 minutes a night, shooting 22 times. So 28.5 does seem low for someone like Shai, to be honest. I thought in a big game like this, where he's probably going to get more opportunities, live for the moment type shit, that it would be a little bit higher. But yeah, I don't know if I could get around him at this point. 28.5. Yeah, he was only playing 31 minutes a night in his last 10. I don't know if he started to look as good as he once was. But in saying that, these last few games didn't mean too much to them, I'd say. But yeah, I've got no gut feel there on the points. Looking at his assists, 5.5, 4 out of his last 10. Head to head, he's cashed this in 2 out of 3 games against the Pelicans. 2 out of his last 3. He's only played them twice this year. He cashed 1 out of 2. But I haven't bet on Shai too much all year, and I'm probably not going to start now. I want to see how he performs in these playoffs before I start betting on him. Rebounds lines at 5.5. He has cashed this in 5 of his last 10. And against the Pels in the past 4 of his last 8, he's gone under in his last 4. But prior to that, he went over in 4 straight. So SGA, I cannot get a read on whatsoever. Let's have a look at Jalen Williams. Now, his points prop, 18.5. He's gone under in 4 straight to close off the year, so I'm not too concerned with that. But in head-to-head matchups against the Pels, he's cashed in only 2 of his last 8. So that's not great. We don't like that. But in saying that, what are we doing? Playing 34 minutes a night in those games. His last 10, 29. Let's look at the season. On the season, Jalen Williams playing 31 minutes a night. Let's just assume, given the playoff factors, he plays 35 minutes in this game. Let's give him an extra 4 minutes on these filters. And we can see he's cashed this line in 13 out of 18 games where he plays 35 minutes. In head-to-heads, when he gets the same amount of game time against the Pels, he's cashed in only 1 out of his last 4. So I'm not loving that. Assists for Jalen Williams, 4.5. 4 of his last 10, and only 2 out of his last 8 against the Pelicans. He did, however, cash this in both games against the Pelicans this year. That's quite interesting. Potential assists, 10 and 9 potential assists in those games. I wonder what his stats look like with a minimum of 35 minutes. Jalen Williams plays at least 35 minutes. He has cashed this line in 10 of 18 games this season, so not overwhelming numbers. Rebounds, you got 3.5. 5 out of his last 10, but he has rebounded well against the Pels. 7 out of 8 games, Jalen Williams has covered this line. But this is heavily juiced, minus 142, so that's not overly exciting. So I don't like what I see for the Pelis. Let's have a look at Chet. Chet up against Valanciunas, but most likely Trey Murphy. What do we see? His points, 4 out of his last 10 games, head-to-head matchups. Yeah, he's been smoking the Pels. 3 consecutive games against the Pels. Chet Holmgren has covered this line. The Pels not great defensively to starting 5s, so you can definitely get some buckets here. I don't mind this for Chet. First playoff game as well in his rookie season. He could step up. Now, on the season, he's cashed this line 46 out of 82, so at a 56% hit rate to cover this 15.5, and he's got a 100% hit rate against the Pels. This season, playing 29.4 minutes a night. Let's give him an extra 3 minutes. Let's go games where he plays at least 32 minutes. What's his hit rate then? Chet, 20 out of 28 games playing at least 32 minutes has covered this points line of 15.5. So, yeah, he's finished on the hook 3 times as well. I don't mind this. At minus 102 for Chet Holmgren, I might be able to take that. So, I'll be looking into that one for sure. What else is there? Rebounds. Now, Chet, rebounding is a little bit inconsistent. 4 of his last 10, but he did hit his rebound line in all 3 games against the Pelicans, which is pretty wild. Played 33 minutes a night in those games against the Pels. So that aligns to the whole minutes thing. Let's do the same thing and check his minutes. 32 minutes. What's his hit rate on the year? 15 out of 28 games where he plays more at least 32 minutes, he's covered his rebound line. He did, however, cover his rebound line against the Pels, but this is not as convincing as the points prop, I'll say. But if I'm looking at a value play for Chet Holmgren, I might take his points and his rebounds in a parlay, and we'll see where we land. Assists, not a big assist guy, but he is capable of some games. His line's at 1.5, though, which seems low. He's cashed that at a 70% rate this year. 1.5 at minus 119. This is crazy. Now, he's averaging 4.3 potential assists here against the Pelicans. He only needs to get 2 assists. I don't mind this either. I don't mind it. Chet Holmgren. I just worry playoffs, SGA, higher usage rate. Giddey's getting more time as well. That's had enough. I've had enough of Chet. Getting me too excited. Let's have a look at Josh Giddey, and then let's get the fuck out of here because this is a long-ass video. Now, his points prop 12.5. He's cashed in 7 of his last 10. He's hit this in 6 of 8 games against New Orleans Pelicans. 1 game against them this year, he scored 25 points. 12.5 seems very low. This year, though, he's only hit this in 33 of 80 games. His more recent games where he's been popping off, 14 of his last 20 he's been cashing in. Started the year off slow, but now he's getting a lot more minutes, 26.8 minutes per game. This year in the 2 games, 30 and 22 minutes. So, yeah, probably lean to the over there for Josh Giddey, but I think I like the Chet play a little bit more, so I don't want to put too many bets for similar props that could contradict each other. Josh Giddey assists, though, 5.5. 6 of his last 10 in head-to-head matches. He's only hit this in 3 of 8 games against the Pels. His rebound prop, how about that? 4 of his last 8 against the Pelicans, 4 of his last 10 games overall. His rebound line is at 7.5. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. 7.5 rebound line for a guard who plays less than 30 minutes? I don't think so. All right. Well, look, let me just check the recording time. Up over an hour and a half. God damn. That's all I've got for you today, gang. I hope you guys appreciate all the effort that I go through. Hopefully I can find some winning picks. If not, hopefully you find some winning picks and you can keep hitting those bangers. If you liked the video, give it the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch you guys tomorrow and we'll preview the next set of games. Let's go.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. You don't even have to pay me.